Welcome to Niantic Community Church, where no matter who you are and no matter where you are on your life's journey, you're welcome here. My name is Pastor Stephanie Haskins, and I am talking today with Mary Childs about resilience. I found two definitions of resilience that really speak to me. The first is resilience is the capacity to recover from difficulty. And the second is it's the ability of an object to spring back into shape. Elasticity. So I wanted to invite Mary to this Zoom room. And we don't know who will watch this in the future. This is for our church community and anyone who will benefit from it. But I wanted to invite Mary because she's engaged in the work of anti-racism in her community. She's also the parent of 4 wonderful kids who are biracial. And so she's living this journey on multiple levels. So I wanted to invite her to share about her journey, and hopefully people can get something from this in the future. And Mary, my first question for you is, what does resilience mean to you as a parent of biracial kids and as a social justice worker?
Well, I like that you gave 2 definitions of resilience. I hadn't heard the elasticity part. I thought that was, that's pretty awesome. I mean, I think there's a lot to bounce back from, with, personally for me, resilience comes around having a tribe, having a group of people who you can sort things out, you can show your vulnerabilities, and as you grapple with things, acknowledge misunderstandings and errors, and so while there's a lot that I've learned, I still acknowledge there's an awful lot I still need to learn, and being able to have a group of people to kind of get energy from and build from has been super helpful. There's a group at church who are just instrumental and grounded in doing what's right and using your voice to push people who maybe don't think they need to do anything, things are good enough kind of. So we're refining our skills in that continued persistent pushing. So it makes us more resilient because we keep finding our ways to share our voices that way. As Mama Bear, I find myself fighting in different ways. Right now, all 4 of them are distance learning. So there are many times where I'm struggling with, do I push them because I know that grade doesn't match who they are and what they're able? Or do I, treat the whole child as this individual who needs to grow and be okay with, who they are in the world? And so it's always this battle of what's going to help them be their best person down the road versus what's super important right now. And is it worth damaging the relationship that I have with my kids? So we're always fighting that way. My husband and I have had many conversations around how the world will view my children. And, if the police officer stops one of them, what might be the perception and where do we need to give them information about what might happen? And that's, I understand, a conversation that not everyone has to have. But as a family, we try and be realistic about what our kids need to be able to be in this world. We've had some really good conversations around, where the joy is. And part of being resilient means that you can find the joy in those moments. And so if it's over, a really silly game that we're all just laughing about, with our family time, then that's the joy. So not only, creating an insulator for our kids, but also helping them to tap into the joy. So if that's singing that loudly, for the rest of us to hear, then you know what? You have that joy.
I heard joy. I heard find your tribe. I heard weighing present realities with future considerations. And I think a lot of people will resonate with, we need people for the journey. You know, we can't do this work alone. I've seen, frankly, a lot of white folks who have felt a call to do anti-racism work or to enter into the conversation, maybe for the first time in their life in the last year. So I wondered what you would say to those who are considering either, you know, joining that work for the first time, or maybe taking the next step beyond a comfort zone.
I mean, it's hard, I think, because many of us were brought up, speaking from a white space and a white upbringing. We were, you know, I think many of us were thinking that this had gone away, and that, you know, it was a thing of the past, and it was something that, you know, didn't still need to be contended with. And yet some of the backlash that has occurred post President Barack Obama have really, the instances have really laid it out there. The pandemic that we've, you know, been trying to navigate has really made some things quite glaring. And while social justice is on all levels, you know, education, housing, policing, financial, you know, anything to do with equity, it can be daunting and overwhelming to think of all of it at once. I think for me, the place I needed to start was with my own understanding of being white, and kind of how did we get here? The Faith Forum that we do on Sunday started, we were looking at whiteness, and we used Paul Helvig had set up a scene on radio, Seeing White, and he started the episode that we kind of as a group listened to. It was like later in the season. And so then of course I had to go back and start the season from the beginning. And that really laid some good foundation for, okay, this is where we are. And the reality that I'm currently in is not the same reality. And you know, being able to pull yourself up on your own merit is not really what's afforded to all people. And I think I'm always struggling with the act, must do, must fix, too much, you know, all of that. And I'm trying to temper it with get more information. Yes, acting is good, signing a petition, you know, being vocal is important, but also get more information and find out, you know, where can the power shift? Where does one hold power? And how, without being, and in the church, it's hard because, you know, some very awful things have happened in the name of Christ. And so being able to recognize power in a way that's not using it as saviorism, but using it in a way that is anti-racist, meaning it's not racist. It doesn't oppose or oppress anyone in a racist way. So lots of reading, lots of podcasts and audiobooks is a great way to start figuring out, because we were all kind of raised in an environment that might have given us some misinformation and some information we have to struggle with a little bit. So.
Well, and I wondered, you mentioned the Seeing White series. Is there a podcast and or a book that you would love to recommend to folks who want to kind of begin to examine their white privilege?
Seen on Radio, which is seen like SCENE on Radio, is the podcast, and it was season 4. I think it's season 4. But look for Seeing White, whatever season that was. And I believe there's between 12 and 14 episodes, and those are probably an hour, 45 minutes to an hour each. So that's a great listen. What I appreciated about the podcast was that it's, John Biewen, who is a white reporter, kind of struggling with, where whiteness is and how we got here. And then Chenjerai Kumanika is, I think he's at Rutgers now, but he is African American, and he is, in the field of communication. And so, like, how we communicate is, and they have just real conversations, like things that you might want to ask. Books, I would say, for me, White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo, and Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, his book, How to Be an Antiracist. They're definitely adult reads, and they're things that, give you a whole lot of topics to think about. What I liked about Dr. Kendi's book was that it's the information I wasn't given, and being steeped in, born and raised in New England, steeped in suburban public schools. There was the history that I was given, and that I just took to be the history, and never once did I ask, well, what about, and name somebody else's perspective. So Dr. Kendi's book gives you the other perspective, or at least one of the other perspectives, and that just, for me, cracks it open. How do you get? There's a lot to learn, but those would be my starting places. I think those were my starting places. So.
Thank you, Mary. And we'll have those resources available in terms of listing them connected to this video. So people can, especially I want us to link the podcast, the website for the podcast, and definitely those books that you mentioned too. You've mentioned the church already as being places in the church as being kind of incubators for some of this thinking and reflection. And so I'm wondering how your faith influences your journey, or sustains you, or, part of resilience, I think, built into it is that, if we're kind of springing back to home here, we're never on a perfect journey. So that goes with, doesn't go without saying, but it's absolutely true. So we don't have to have everything figured out. But I wondered how your faith has helped you to make sense of this, or has sustained you, or how you like to move forward, maybe in the future with a continued kind of relationship between your faith and the work that you're doing.
Faith, for me, we landed, at Naina Community Church when I was 4. So for the longest time, faith meant the building and the people. And coming back later when my kids, they needed that as well. Faith has now, it's grown, it's matured a bit, I think, in my thinking of faith. I believe that God is there, and that he can handle all of it. So we talked on Sunday about God like the more you know God, the more there is to know. And, I feel like, yeah, that's right. Like every time I learn something new about me and myself, there's God there as well. And there's a new way to consider faith and how that impacts my life. So I think continued interactions and being challenged to go back and look for verses in the Bible. On Sunday, someone mentioned Lamentations, and that when you're angry, those are great because you're sure God can handle your anger, and there are moments of joy and sadness and anger, and it's the 12-step program all the time. You just keep cycling through whatever the emotions are, and the Bible has a place for all of that. So I think being able to continue to connect with members from church and hear how God is in their life, and what works for them, I think continues to help me grow and learn my own faith. Moving forward, I think continuing to be an example for my children, I expect to then see it moving forward with them, and as they they grow and learn and they navigate whatever's in front of them, being able to be the example for them and give them the "I don't really know, let's find out" kind of response, because there's a lot I don't know, guaranteed, and I'm sometimes blundering, but hopefully we can grow with that. So that's where forward, I guess, is.
Well, I love that, Mary. And it reminds me again that this is a journey, that sometimes our journey feels a little bit blundering or meandering. Thank you for mentioning, thank you for mentioning the idea that the more we know of God, or the more we know of ourselves. I mean, I think all of this, the more knowledge that we have, it kind of, it adds, it builds, and it goes deeper. And so, and the journey is good. I always feel that God kind of leads us step by step. And sometimes it doesn't seem that clear cut or straightforward, but there really is some kind of, there is God like kind of saying, "Oh, good, you did that. How about this now?" There's a real there's a real sense of that. To me, humor is the way that I practice resilience. And lightness and fun is a way that I can be resilient, because I think this work is heavy. There's a lot of heaviness to this work, right? What you're talking about, dismantling privilege, looking at privilege, doing work in your community, that can be really, really heavy. So my fun, silly, maybe stupid question is, if you could have one superhero power, what would it be?
I was thinking, the one that like does the dishes and the laundry and the chores, like Clickety. But then there's something really okay about doing those things. So I don't know that I would want that taken away. I think for me, some way to calm me down enough to be able to actively listen in a really thoughtful, engaging way. Like if I had a superhuman power, I could pause things to be able to just do this, and just in that moment hear it, live it, be it, and then unpause everything. And it doesn't pause the person who I'm talking to or who I'm interacting with, but just pause things everywhere else for just a second while I do this.
Thank you for thinking outside the box about your super. We need a magical maid who can do all the things unless you want to do them.
Well, one of my jokes is that I have a magic sink, because whenever I leave the kitchen, it fills with dishes. So it's magic.
I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for the valuable things that you've shared. And I hope, and I'm going to say, I trust that this video will reach the people it needs to reach for their benefit. And I hope you benefited from the conversation too. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for asking the questions. I appreciate it.